welcome back to the Oxventure YouTube channel. We've already debuted the first episode of Oxventure Wyrdwood. We haven't seen episode 2 yet, but this seems like a pretty good time to talk about our characters, which were, of course, made with the new player's handbook. And would you believe it, Wizards of the Coast has sponsored us to do exactly that. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, Johnny.
That's a handsome-looking fub you've got there.
Isn't it nice? The new
The fub.
the new player's handbook. Yeah, you all sunk your teeth into this figuratively.
Hey, you can't prove that.
In order to make your characters.
Those teeth marks could be anyone's.
I don't think that's true. I think it would be great evidence that it was you in particular.
Like a dental cast and prove it.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. Okay. It's easier to admit it. I did sink my teeth into it. Yes.
Good, because I said figuratively, so you were already off the hook.
Oh,
but,
damn.
We're just going to have a sort of general chit-chat about the experience of making our characters using the new PHB, and also sort of what their whole deal is. So who wants to go first? Should we start very broad? Like, what were the initial sort of ideas that sparked off your various characters?
I think for me, obviously the Wyrdwood itself is like almost a character in and of itself within this campaign. So I thought it would be good to have a character who was kind of familiar with that environment. And so I was looking for a kind of foresty guide kind of character to be kind of, I don't know, the connection between an adventuring party who are coming from all corners of this region to this specific sort of area, which is obviously very important to the plot. So
You're saying you didn't start with the wig and work backwards?
No, it's like the wig came later on when I chose the barbarian class, and I decided that barbarians need to have slightly longer hair than what I'm capable of growing. So, but yeah, it's I think with Lug, that's where he sort of started out, and I think one of the cool things about the new player's handbook is that it has these sort of character backgrounds. So now you're not so much tied to a sort of background that connects with your class. You can kind of be a bit more sort of freeform with it. So as an example, I already knew that Luke was going to be playing a ranger character, which again has a bit of crossover with the sort of forest guide type stuff. So what I thought I'd do was play a barbarian class character, which would fit quite well with the Firbolg kind of archetype, but then use the background of a guide, which gives you different sort of elements from the kind of druid character sheet and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a really nice way to kind of introduce that kind of forest guide element to the character, but without having to play a trad sort of ranger. So you can kind of mix and match a lot more and be a lot more sort of imaginative with how you approach it.
Nothing wrong with being a trad ranger.
There's nothing trad about your character.
That's true. Or shall I go next? Should we go around this way?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So my character, Happen, who is a human ranger. I was reading a fantasy novel called The Black Tongue Thief, and there's a character in it who has this power to, like, their superpower is that they can sense whether they are currently lucky or not. They can sort of feel it in their stomach. And I thought that was really cool, and it struck me as something that was like a really fun mechanic for a tabletop. So I basically worked backwards from trying to come up with a character who, is like completely obsessed with luck and not so much like manipulating it, but is just sort of like giving into it. And I liked the idea of trying to marry like something that was happening to the character in world with something that's happening mechanically with me playing the game. Because sometimes when you're doing tabletop stuff, there can be a bit of like a disconnect between the dice rolling and the maths and like what's happening in the story. So yeah, I like that when I roll this special dice, it's a sort of connection into the world of Wyrdwood that I find particularly nice and enjoyable. So yeah, that's how I did it.
In the lore of Wyrdwood kind of inspired me to want to play a character who was dedicated to like her community, dedicated to like nature, and dedicated to her particular deity, which sort of lent itself in turn to a cleric. I always wanted to play a healer. I've never really played a sort of dedicated. We've never had, I don't think, a dedicated
Not
healer.
a dedicated one, no.
Not anyone
So-
who bothers.
Oxventure used to have two healers, but they just didn't do
Yeah,
it.
someone who wants to heal, let's say. Someone who enjoys healing and is good at it. And
That's what you play in video games generally, right?
I do actually. More often than not, I'd say most often a caster, and in a multiplayer game, I like to play a healer.
Just don't want to walk around a lot.
Yeah.
Stand at the back.
I think it's also if you want to get psychoanalytical.
Ooh,
I think
okay.
it's about.
Which I didn't say.
Too bad. Let's go. Now it's group therapy. It's about making yourself useful and making your earning your spot. I think. So that's just a little something of mine to unpack. But in D&D, I wanted to play a cleric. I wanted to play someone also who is aligned, kind of like good, lawful good, neutral good. You know, just as a sort of break from the kind of chaotic evil that was Prudence. And so a cleric from the life domain, and it's very refreshing. Sort of aesthetically, I wanted it to be like sort of inspired by The Wicker Man or Midsummer, the kind of horror folk vibes, but in that kind of like very light, bright, like fertility rite, summery sort of sinister.
Before things go wrong.
Before things go wrong. Yeah, before we push someone off a cliff or whatnot. So that's me, and I've got so many healing spells. I don't know what to do with myself. More spell slots than I've ever had. And I really enjoyed the new character sheets that come out of the new PHB.
Very sensibly laid out.
I really enjoyed the new layout. It's very sensible. I can see everything I need. It just makes sense. Yeah.
So I'm playing two characters. So I'm playing Robin, who just uses the commoner stat log. That's literally him. He's not particularly good at anything, not particularly bad at anything. He's just a regular guy. So that was quite straightforward. But I think like the thing that I wanted to do with the character, I wanted to play someone who's very different to Corazon, because we're doing a new thing and I don't want to just do the same thing over and over again. And also I wanted something that had room for the story to like develop of that character and like some tension and like an arc to go on. So it's a kind of an odd inspiration point for this character, but there's a character in the Guilty Gear fighting games called Zapper, who is a guy who's possessed by the girl from The Ring, and he's unconscious for his fights, and she's like doing all this dark magic and stuff. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic that I don't think they really explore much in the games. It's just a gimmick. But if two people were occupying the same body, they would both want to be in control of that body. How does that tension resolve itself? Like where does that go? Do they try and strike an accord? Are they always in opposition to one another? I don't know myself at the moment. I'm going to enjoy discovering that as we continue. But I felt like the other character, who isn't a commoner, needed to be extremely powerful magic user, which is why I went with the sorcerer, and particularly the aberrant school of sorcery. Used to be aberrant mind. It's now just aberrant sorcery, which is all based on psionics and psychic powers, very mind-based. So it feels like if someone were able to take over someone's body and mind, they would be a aberrant sorcerer. So yeah, I now have, you can't see this probably, I've got like literally 30 spells here on my table, a bunch of spell slots. Like Corazon had like 3 spells and I would just use them as a joke really. But now I had to learn the sorcerer mechanics, and actually it's been way more straightforward than I thought it would be. The player's handbook has made it really easy, and I feel like I get everything and I know how it works, and I thought I would have more trouble with it than I did, but I haven't. It's been great.
Well, for me, similar to Jay and Andy, I wanted to play a slightly different character to who I played previously. So Merowyn, true neutral, sort of kind of stayed at a point and was like mates with everyone in the end, but like not much up and down. So yeah, I wanted to just kind of like really go for a character that's very different and very clearly not a good person. I wanted to do a bit Disney villainy sort of thing, but also in a way like counter to, so Mike's character is a kind of someone who understands the world. I really wanted to do a character that is a little bit, ends up being sort of like the audience person who's like, I don't get this, because she's such a fish out of water with everything. She's so tired all the time if she has to like do anything like physical exertion compared to everyone else. She's someone who's completely relied on magic. And with that, like I decided to make her a wizard. So, you know, she comes from this fancy, like kind of financial huge building that she used to look after everyone's money, and everything went weird. And so like her whole life has been upended. So like she has been affected almost more than anyone else in the party. And then she's suddenly having to like slum it with all of these random people who seem to be like way more chill and cool with the forest and everything. And again, very different to Merylwen. Like just have her just be like, well, what is this? And also I had the fun thing of she's elf, she's part high elf and also part human. And because there isn't a half elf character anymore, when I was making the character with a bit of back and forth with Johnny so that my character wasn't like OP, had a bit of like, it was a bit like choosing pick a mix of things, of being like, well, I'll have this so that I can have some extra spells that I can prepare before a thing, but then I won't be able to sleep in a trance because, yeah, like, you know, offers up opportunities for her to actually be snuck up on and etc. So, yeah, I just wanted to do something very different. And yeah, I really enjoyed picking out lots of fun different backgrounds to give me some little kind of bonuses as a magic user, like you choosing the correct backgrounds and feats that will give me little extra points and things, which has been really useful.
I'm not really allowed to talk about any of the characters I've made because they're all secrets and you do not met them yet or fought them yet or anything. But for my money,
Tell us one.
no,
Tell us about one.
I shan't.
Tell us about Sigmund.
Oh, you don't even want to know about Sigmund. But while I was building Sigmund, I did have the following thoughts. Now, I really like the fact that species have been spun out into sort of like its own thing, and then you've got the other half with the background, where you can kind of...
Yeah.
It means that you can make characters that defy expectations, which I think is something you've all kind of like certainly had a swing at doing. Whereas, you know, like before it'd be like, oh, you know, there's a half-orc turns up and, you know, it's kind of written into the lore. It's like, so they have a barbarous nature that will come out at some point. But now it's like, oh, this is a half-orc who's a librarian. And they're a librarian first. I just think that's like, it's going to keep people guessing, which is what I like, personally.
Yeah, it's just by its very nature, like a ton of different combinations, and you can get some really interesting combinations, you know. What about a barbarian librarian? A bar librarian.
Barb librarian.
Librarian.
Conan the librarian.
You
There you
hold
go.
my hand.
Barbarian.
Yeah, I think that's the bit I really enjoyed from the character creation process, is really digging into, and there's a ton of different backgrounds in the book that are, you know, all sorts of different ways. And even if it's just a thought starter, do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean you have to use that lore for your character. None of this is prescriptive, but it gives you some interesting ways to approach it. And, you know, there are obviously different benefits and drawbacks to picking a background, but you can always change the storytelling around it to better suit what you've got in mind.
Yeah, it's like a story prompt, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, each background is literally one paragraph, and then you've got ability scores, feat, skill proficiencies, some tool proficiencies, and then your equipment. Like it's nice and easy to pick up, but it also inspires like a lot of things. Like, are you an artisan? Or on the opposite page, are you a criminal?
Maybe both.
Probably, yeah. Artisanal criminal?
Yeah.
Small batch robberies.
Yeah. Boutique. Heisting.
Stealing only the finest grains.
Pop up, hold up. The book I found very enjoyable to read, and obviously it's just always cool to read more D&D source stuff, but I feel like we need to give a huge shout out to like the setting of Wyrdwood generally, because when thinking about character creation, that was probably the thing that was, you know, I had this idea that I wanted my character happen to be like all tangled up in like his relationship with luck and what that means, but I think it didn't really all start to coalesce into like a person I could visually imagine and whose backstory I could imagine and stuff until Johnny started sending us basically like prompts and like movies to watch and books to read.
Mood boards.
Yeah, like mood boards and stuff. And yeah, I have never ever been interested in folk horror before, to be honest, but like I've consumed so much of it over the past 6 months on preparing, and I think as an aesthetic, it's so good, and so it's so like grotty and yeah, like fantasy with real like grime under its fingernails. So I'm super jazzed to be like playing in that.
I seized immediately on the horror aspect of it, obviously, and I was
Yeah.
just like, I just want to hit like a horror concept for a character. Like, what's like an objectively horrifying basis for the character, and that was led out of the folk horror setting of Wyrdwood. Went in a weird direction, but that was the genesis for sure.
I mean, obviously, you know, when it came to taking that sort of folk horror ball and running with it, you, Luke, really ran with it with Happen's odd die. Can you tell us a bit more about the whole?
Yes, with pleasure. So it's called the Cadence dice, and it has 5 ones on it and 5 20s for a 50% critical chance. I had real fun like figuring out how that should work. It was actually while we were filming the final season of the Oxventurers Guild, like in breaks between filming, I was like drawing in a notepad, like what do you call it, like the net of a dice, like the kind of exploded kind of view, like trying to figure out where all the numbers should go and like what should replace what. I love the idea of a character who embraces good and bad luck equally.
Is there a reason you didn't make it 10 ones and 10 20s?
I thought it would be too easy then, because you have to remember that for Happen, a 1 and a 20 is what he's after. That's like what he wants, because that's what he thinks pleases Cadence. So I wanted there to be some results, like a 12 that's just like, It has to be the option for a mediocre roll, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tricky thing to balance, but yeah, no, I really like it. 50% critical chance feels about right to me. We've already had, in what we've recorded so far, a good number of crits.
You're only allowed to use it a certain number of times, right?
Yeah, 3 times per long rest was, I kind of figured out how this might work mechanically, then ran that by Johnny and Zach, who's our Oxventure producer, who's just off camera here. Hello. Oh. Zach,
He does that.
Zach, please don't do any more muttering. It's upsetting the audience. I'm sorry, everyone.
Well, then you tied that in with the Swarmkeeper class, right? Which is sort of a different class that isn't in the PHB, but of course, the PHB is back compatible.
Yeah.
With everything else.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really good. It felt kind of right, because with the folk horror vibe, that there would be like swarms. Swarms of all sorts of stuff everywhere.
It's from Tasha's, right? Swarmkeeper?
Swarmkeeper, yeah, I think so.
So I made a Swarmkeeper when we did our Tasha's video.
Yes.
It's a good class.
Yeah, it's really cool. I wanted to be a ranger as well, because I think this luck sort of shtick would be quite a lot to keep my head round and get my head round, and probably for a viewer as well to understand. So I didn't then want to add on like 50 spells and like loads of like complicated stuff. And rangers are pretty straight down the line, at least if you try and create them that way. So, you know, Happen is pretty much has a bow that he can shoot. That's sort of the thing that he does. And obviously he has these magical sprites that can make mischief.
We've also already touched on the fact that Morven has 30 odd spells, something like that.
It's quite a lot. I haven't counted. But
How was it? I mean, obviously, you know, this is a very different character for you, but a lot of the spells are the same, but a lot of them are tweaked, or some of them are brand new. Those of you with magical sensibilities, how was that to explore when making your characters?
Well, it's exciting that sorcerers now have their Eldritch Blast in the form of Sorcerer's Burst.
Yeah, talk us through it.
So Sorcerer's Burst, you cast Sorcerer's Energy at a creature within range. It takes 2d8 damage of a type that you choose, so you can choose if you want cold, fire, lightning, psychic, like whatever you want.
So you can basically double that every time.
You've got to figure out what they're weak to first, but it's like, yeah, if you figured out what the weakness of a foe is, and it's a cantrip like Eldritch Blast, so you can just fire it off at will. Well, I mean, there's the debt, of course, but you don't need to worry about spell slots when you're firing it off, which I think really helps the sorcerer class in terms of being a damage dealer, because nothing quite matches up to Eldritch Blast in terms of like sheer damage per spell slot used. You can just fire them off.
Yeah, but it might
Twin
miss.
blast.
Eldritch Blast is, I don't know.
It's a very glass cannon-y cantrip, isn't it? Glass cantrip?
glass. But yeah, no, it was fun putting together. But I just kept taking like feats and bonuses that just added more spells and more spells. So different schools of aberrant sorcery. There's a Fey Touch a feat that you can take that adds even more spells. So I'm just got spells coming out the wazoo right now. It's great.
We're level 5 as well. I don't know if we've ever like mentioned that on camera, but
no.
we're all level 5.
Yeah.
So there's lots more spells.
There's certainly room to grow, yeah.
To come.
You thought you'd seen the maximum number of spells coming out the wazoo. You ain't seen, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh, one thing I like, so as a wizard, like I've got my spell book of like my learned spells, but then I, like when I was a druid, prepare a set number of spells. So I think I have 9 prepared spell slots, like for anything. And there's a like new thing, like if I finish a short rest, I can study my spell book and swap out. So like, if it's like I'm like, hey, can we have a short rest before we go do a big fight? So I can maybe swap out the thing where I leave a message on a rock for something that will shoot something in the face. Thanks. So there's a bit of like fun added flexibility there. And I've had a lot of fun as someone who's never done wizard before, is going into like the illusion subclass and like getting the little bonuses from that subclass. So like every time I go up, I not only choose a select number of spells that I can learn, but I also get like a bonus illusion spell as well. So it's kind of like, num extra. Yeah, thank you. Love it. Num, 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 num.
I think it's refreshing as well that we just get to make new Dungeons and Dragons characters, because we've made lots of TTRPG characters since then, but like the first tabletop characters that any of us made were D&D characters, and they were such a mess because we like
Hey.
like if I think about that very first character sheet compared with this nice neat one where like I sort of know where what everything is and how it should be laid out and stuff. So I just really enjoyed the process of like starting from scratch in D&D with the D&D mechanics. I found that very refreshing, bringing the experience to bear of having made characters in like other types of games, like Blaze in the Dark and Deadlands, obviously. Happen definitely has a lot of like mechanically. I wanted to just keep doing what I was doing in Deadlands, which was have a character who does one thing very well. It was nice to bring all that experience to this.
Right, well, before we wrap this up, has anyone got any last thoughts or things that they have been like burning to get out about their characters?
I can't believe that no one in the Oxventurers Guild had Counterspell. So we now have Counterspell in the party.
Yeah, 2 counter spells as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that and a dedicated healer, or rather someone putting the dedication into healing.
Yeah.
All in all, you're a much more functional group of dysfunctional adventurers.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, not Robin, certainly.
Well, I think like we've learned
Poor guy.
from like having played D&D for ages, and then like I think like something that is important to bear in mind is that like our first D&D character was made for a one-off celebration video, and it's turned into this huge thing, and it was really nice to kind of like I kind of just was like, yeah, elf, druid, yeah, cool, and didn't think too hard about it. So it was really fun, like taking time to really be like, yeah, okay, what are my character's motivations, and really just.
I think
Get
our
into the
original
roleplay.
Oxventurers Guild characters were really like suited for a broad fantasy setting, which is what Geth was. And now that we've got a much more kind of focused, like specific flavored fantasy setting with the folk horror, that our characters, and it's a nice development for more experienced D&D players as well, because they are less tropey or less kind of major archetypes and a little bit more kind of flavored, I think, a little bit more like defined.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for your thoughts and for your characters, which were, of course, made with the new Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, which you can get right now, this very second. I mean, do finish watching the video first. Thank you very much to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this video, and we will see you on the next one. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Farewell!